everyone, this is Stephanie from the Pasadena Public Library. Today I want to share with you a tutorial on how to sew an aromatherapy eye pillow. What I like about this project is that it's really simple. If you can sew a straight line, you can make this. And it's really soothing for headaches and eye strain, so if you've been spending a lot of time looking at devices lately, then hopefully this will be really helpful. So this bag has a removable, washable cover, and it can be used cold by keeping it in the freezer in a Ziploc bag, or you can use it hot by microwaving it in 15-second intervals until it reaches a warm temperature. So to start off, I'm just going to go over the materials that you'll need to make this project. First, you'll need a piece of fabric for your outer cover, which is at least 5.5 inches by 22 inches. You can use natural woven fabric such as quilting cotton or cotton flannel. You'll also need a piece of fabric that's 5 inches by 19 inches, so it's a little bit smaller, and that can just be a scrap of muslin or a scrap of quilting cotton fabric that you want for the inner pillow, and it's going to be hidden inside the cover so you won't see it. You'll also need some sewing machine thread in a coordinating color to match your fabric. You'll also need something to fill your pillow with. So for this you can use 1.5 cups of whole flax seeds, rice, or lentils. Optionally, you can add some fragrance to your pillow by using several drops of essential oil or 1/2 cup of dried lavender. Okay guys, the first thing I'm going to show you how to do is draft the pattern using a plain sheet of computer paper and a ruler. So first I'm going to draft the piece that we'll use for the external pillowcase. So I need a piece that is 11 inches long, which I already have because that's the length of my paper. And then I want to mark something 5.5 inches wide. So I'm going to mark over 5.5 inches with my ruler. On one side and then on the other side, 5.5 inches. Then I'm going to use my ruler to draw a line connecting those two marks I just made. Now I'm just going to cut along this line here. And I'll label my pattern piece, while making a note to cut this piece on the fold here. Now I'm going to draft the pattern piece for the inner pillow. So this I'm going to mark at 5 inches, so it's a little bit smaller. Then draw a line across. Now I'm going to mark 9.5 inches. Then mark 9.5 inches again on the line that we drew. Then I'll draw a line across and cut out this piece. Again, I'll label my pattern piece and make a note to cut it on the fold. So now we're ready to cut out. I'm going to take my smaller pattern piece and place it along the fold of my fabric. So you can see that my fabric is folded in half and my fold line is right here. So I'm going to pin this pattern piece right here and cut it out. Now I'm going to cut out the fabric for my pillowcase. It's important to note that if you want to cut both of your pattern pieces out of the same piece of fabric, you can do that, but you'll need to fold your fabric twice instead of just in half. So see how I've folded my pieces like this, and then I'm able to place my pattern pieces on top. But I only need to cut one pattern piece out, so I'm just going to fold my fabric in half like this. Now I'll pin it in place and cut it out. So now I'm over at my ironing board, and I'm going to just take my inner pillow piece and I'm going to fold down the short edges by 3/8 of an inch and press it with the iron. And I'm going to do that with one short edge and then repeat with the other. Now place your pillowcase fabric wrong side up, and you're going to take one short side, and fold it down by 1/4 of an inch, press it, and then fold it by another 1/4 of an inch and press again to create a tiny hem. Now flip this fabric around so you're working with the other end. This time you're going to fold and press it at 1/4 of an inch, but then we're going to fold and press at 1 inch. So this will have a wider hem. Now you're going to take your inner pillow piece and fold it in half, right sides together. Just like this. You should see the raw edges of where you folded the short ends on the outside. Now pin together along both long edges. Now I'm going to sew down these long sides, leaving this short side unsewn, remembering to backstitch at the beginning and end. The seam allowance here is 3/8 of an inch, so on my sewing machine that is the first mark just to the right of my presser foot. So now I'm going to take my pillowcase piece, and right along where I have these folded edges, I'm going to edge stitch right along the edge on both sides of the fabric, right along the fold. Now I'm going to lay out my pillowcase piece so that it's facing up, and take the pillow piece, turn it so that it's right side out, and I'm going to place it right about in the center of my pillowcase. Now I'm going to take whichever side has the wider hem. For me it's my right side. I'm going to take this side with the wide hem and fold it over so that it meets right about in the center of my pillowcase. Now I'm going to take the narrow hem side and fold it over so that the two hems line up. Now at the top, I'm going to pin together these 1, 2, 3 layers of pillowcase, and then I'm going to pull out the pillow so it's out of the way. Then again at the bottom, I'm going to pin together these 3 layers of pillowcase. Now I'm going to continue pinning along both long edges. Now I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and sew these 2 long edges at 3/8 of an inch. You may want to slow down when you get to the overlapping section. You can put your needle down through the fabric, lift up your presser foot, and adjust the fabric so that it's not bunching up as it goes underneath the foot. So now I'm going to talk about some different methods for finishing your seams. So what does it mean to finish your seams? Basically, we need to find a way to prevent the edges of our fabric from fraying. So there are a few different methods of doing this. The first one I'm going to talk about is pinking shears. So these are my pinking shears, and they are a special kind of fabric scissors that cut with a zigzag edge. So all I'm going to do with these is cut just barely along the very edge of my fabric, which will create a zigzag edge, and I'm just going to cut the least amount that I can while still creating that zigzag edge. Now I'm going to show you a couple different methods for finishing your edges using the sewing machine. So the first method I'm going to show you is the zigzag stitch method, and then I'm going to show you how to finish the edges on the other side here using the mock overlock stitch, which is an option on my sewing machine. It's okay if you don't have that option on your sewing machine because most sewing machines do have the zigzag option. The first thing I'm going to do is just clean up my edges, cut off any stray threads or any uneven edges, so I have a nice clean edge to work with. Let me just explain some of the settings I'm going to use for this zigzag stitch. First, I'm going to change my stitch selector to the zigzag stitch. So on my machine, I can see on my diagram that that is C, so I'll change my stitch selector to C. Then for the length, I'm going to change that to a little bit shorter, so somewhere between 1 and 2. And then finally for my width, I'm going to keep at 5, or whatever is the widest width on your machine. So now I can see as I move my hand wheel, I can see my needle is moving to the right and the left. And I can note the position of the rightmost point of the needle and line up the edge of my fabric with that point. You want to make sure that the stitching that you previously did, you're not in any risk of your zigzag stitching over that point. So that straight stitch line should be somewhere to the left of where you are currently zigzag stitching. Now I'm just going to zigzag stitch all the way along the edge of my fabric, along the full length. And if you have trouble back stitching with the zigzag stitch, you can also just leave some long thread tails that you can knot together at the ends. Now what I'm going to do to finish the zigzag stitch is just do a line of straight stitching just to the left of where I zigzagged. So I'm going to change the settings on my machine back to straight stitch, change the length back to 2.5, and just stitch all the way down to the left of where I previously did my zigzag stitch. So here is what the zigzag stitch with the straight stitch next to it looks like when it's all finished. And this should do a really good job of preventing my fabric from fraying, especially when I put it in the wash. Now I'm going to use the mock overlock stitch, which is this bottom row here, the H. So I'm going to change my stitch selector to H. And then in order to access the second row here, I have to change my length to SS, which means stretch stitch. Now I'm just going to sew down the whole right side of this fabric just like I did with the zigzag stitch, finishing the edges with the mock overlock stitch. So now this is what the finished product looks like. It's nicely finished, it's not going to unravel if I put it in the wash, and just for comparison I'll show you again what the zigzag side looks like. So it's not too different, and I think they're both good options. Now my pillowcase is done, so I'm just gonna turn it right side out and press out the corners. You can give it a final press with your iron if you'd like at this point. Now I'm ready to make the filling for my pillow. So I'm going to be using some flaxseed. I'm going to pour about 1.5 cups of whole flaxseed into a bowl. Now I'm going to add about 1/2 cup of this dried lavender. Now mix everything together with a spoon, and if you're going to be using any essential oils, go ahead and add in several drops of that now. I'm going to add in about 6 drops of this rosemary essential oil. Now I'm going to use a cup to fill up my pillow so that it's about 3/4 of the way full. I don't want to overfill it because then it will be difficult to stitch it closed, and I want it to be soft enough to mold around my face. So now that I've filled up my pillowcase so that it's about 3/4 of the way full, I am just going to pin it closed along this open edge. And I'm going to make sure that all of the flax seeds fall to the bottom of the bag so that they don't get in the way of my stitching. So first I'll just pin it right here along the open edge. Next I'm going to come along and do a second line of pins to prevent the filling from moving towards the end of the bag. The last thing we need to do is stitch near the end of this pinned edge. So I'm going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. The weight of the pillow can kind of drag, so you may need to hold it up with your left hand as you stitch. Remember to back stitch at the beginning and end. And if you notice that you missed a spot in the beginning when you were stitching, go back over that again so that you have a really nice closed end and none of your filling is going to come out. So now our pillow is sewn and our pillowcase is done. I'm just going to put my pillow inside of my pillowcase. So just work it in through one side and then the other. And we're finished! So I hope you learned something from this video and that you are able to make your own aromatherapy eye pillow. Every month, the Pasadena Public Library offers free beginner-friendly sewing classes via Zoom. If you'd like to see our future sewing programs, as well as all of the other virtual programs we offer, you can find a link to our events calendar in the description below. There are a lot of things going on every day, so I hope you'll find something you like. Thanks for watching, and happy sewing!